Hello and welcome to month 4 of our $5 quilt club. We are going to be doing heart applique, and I will show you 2 different ways of doing applique. This is the heart template that you can print out from our website. There are 2 lines. This is the actual size, and then this lighter line is the seam allowance. For our purposes, we are going to be tracing on the darker, bolder line. I'll be going over 2 different ways, fusible and then also foundation turned. So we have some fusible webbing available for purchase. It will be $2.50 for a half yard for the fusible webbing, or $2.50 for a half yard of this fusible interfacing. So those are the 2 options. First, I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do for this fusible webbing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square that I have cut out, and I started tracing it here, so I accidentally moved it. So I'm going to get it line backed up here. And all I'm going to do is trace this line, the bolder line. So this will be my cutting line once I fuse the webbing to the wrong side of my pink fabric. So you want to use a normal ink pen, not a heat sensitive pen, as once you fuse the webbing to the back side of your fabric, it will disappear. So that's not great. So you're just going to take your webbing. There's a paper side. And then there's the webbing side, which you can see is kind of shiny, and it's much more textured when you feel it. So you're going to take your fabric. You can fussy cut it and try to get a particular motif on your pink fabric, or you can just simply put it on there so that it fits. I'm going to put it right here. And all you're going to do is you're going to press it with a hot iron, maybe 5 seconds or so on each section, so that you can get the entire thing fused. And then once it's fused, all you have to do is you just have to peel away once it's cool. So if it's not, this didn't look like I got the bottom very well. If you try to peel it while it's warm, the fusible webbing might stick to the paper and not the fabric. So I'm going to set this aside to cool and show you again what I'm going to do with this. This is just a non-woven interfacing. So I'm going to have this bumpy side up, that's where the fusible adhesive is. So just like before, but this time I'm going to use a heat sensitive pen so that these markings will disappear. So I want these ones to disappear because I don't want this to be visible once I turn my piece out, right side out. So on this one we are going to, this is our stitching line. So I'm going to trace this, oops, a little bit. So you want to do a nice job. You can hold it up to a light box and a window, or it's relatively clear. So I was able to see the shape pretty easily and trace that on there. So with this one, I'm going to put my fabric right sides together, actually. So I'm going to have this here, and I'm just going to position it wherever I want it to be, and then I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch all along this edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will shorten my stitch length down to, I'm going to go down to 1.8. That seems to be my favorite lately. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch directly on this line all the way around. And when you get to the curves, you're going to want to take it a lot slower. Have your needle down, pivot your foot, and then stitch back, going back up around on your curves. So the straighter the lines, the faster you can go, but on those really big curves, you're going to want to try to take it really slow. I put my hands on both sides so that I can use pressure and pull the fabric around so that I can stay on that line. So I'm going to pick up my foot. And this is where a knee bar comes in handy a lot, because instead of having to pause and then pick up my foot and reposition my project, I could just kick out my knee to the side and it would pick up my foot for me. I don't have that one on right now, so I'm just gonna do it the old-fashioned way. So I do like to use a short stitch length so that when I go to pivot and keep my stitches on this line, if I need one more to get to that point right in the center, then it's not a big jump. It's just a little jump. So I'm just going to continue all the way around here. And I'm feeling the fabric bunching up a little bit, so I'm going to pick up the foot and reposition. Okay. And I'm just going to sew over my previous line just a tad, and then go ahead and cut my stitches here. Oops. Okay, so now I have these sewn together, so I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to trim down all of this bulk, because we don't want any of that on the inside of our heart. So I do trim these. I know that curves will turn a lot better when they're really small seam allowances. This is only like an 1/8. When it gets to this point here, you're going to want to cut all the way up to the stitching, but do not cut your stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and trim all the way around. Oh, catching the back there. Keeping it relatively small. There. I think this is a little bulky right there, so I'm going to cut that tip off and then a little bit more right there. So this is the fun part where you get to put a hole in your interfacing. I'm having a hard time pulling that apart. Okay, there we go. So pull that apart so that when you snip it, you're only cutting the interfacing and not your fabric. So once you get that, you can cut it to be a little bit bigger of a hole so that it's easier to turn. So here we go. Now I'm gonna do is flip it. So the advantage of using the adhesive is so that then this will pull this white interfacing to the back, and it will keep it turned under, so that when I have my edge presented on my white background block, I won't see, you don't want to see this, right? So I like to pull that under, and this adhesive will keep that into place so that I will not ever see any much of that. I don't want to see that white on the front of my heart. So I just use my finger. There's plenty of turning tools out there. If you notice that this is not laying really flat, then that's because you didn't clip all the way down to the center. So just turn it right back, wrong sides out again, and then clip it. I'm going to use this pen here to get this tip. It's not super pointy, and I want it a little bit pointier. You can also use a pin and try to pull out a little bit more of that fabric so that it's a little bit better of a point. So I'm going to call that pretty good. All right, and so all you're going to do is continue turning, and then again with this interfacing, this is the interfacing turning method. I want to pull my interfacing. So when I go to iron this, I'm going to pull my interfacing so that I see a tiny bit of the fabric edges, and then I'm going to press it and fuse it into place. And you want to do it just a tiny bit, because the if you have a pressing cloth, that would be really great. If you have your iron on really hot, this one's too hot right now, it can actually stick to your, and it will melt your interfacing. So you do have to be a little careful with that. A pressing mat works out really great. Silicone or Teflon, whatever you have. Or you can just use another piece of fabric. So that looks pretty great. So I'm just going to go ahead and fuse that. Since it has to go through this fabric and it's on the edge, I'm going to hold it there and push with medium pressure straight down. And so then I have this really pretty heart. Ta-da! So here's my heart. Here is my background fabric. In order to find my center point of my background fabric, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a quick press. That way I can find the center, both lengthwise and widthwise. So there we go. So now I have the center marked of my background square, and we need to do the same thing for the heart. So I'm going to put the heart right sides together. It's not, my tracing was not super great, but it'll be fine. So I'm going to press that so I can find the center of my heart. And then I'm also going to press, it's not really going to be, I'm going to press this right here for the center of that heart. So now I have a center line here, and I'm just going to line that center line up with this center line. So see how my point is not on the line there. Now my point right here and my point right here is on the line, and then I need to turn it just a tad to get this one lined up. But there you go. That is all nicely put. So now I need to pin this in place so that I can stitch it down to my background. So in your kits, you will get a, it will be an 8-inch square of white. So we do recommend putting your applique down first. And then once it's stitched down, then you can trim your block up to the 7.5 inches. Otherwise, sometimes if you cut it to 7.5 inches and then add your applique, you'll notice that the stitches can cause it to shrink a tiny bit, and your block might be a tad smaller than other ones. So I'm going to set this aside, but all you're going to do is you can straight stitch, you can decorative stitch, you can zigzag, you can blanket, you can do whatever you want to secure this heart on. You can also use glue to position that in place so that it stays while you take it to your sewing machine and stitch all along the edges. I'll probably have to change my thread to be a very matching pink, or if you like the contrast, I mean, you could do aqua, or you could, stick with white, whatever it is that you think that would complement your heart nicely. So that is the interfacing turned applique method. So for this one, I'm going to peel away, for the fusible applique, I'm going to peel away the paper. And now, nope, not yet. I'm not going to do that yet. Sorry, just kidding. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to secure that one more time. Okay, I'm going to cut this out right on that line, and then I will peel away the paper. So I'm going to cut directly on the line that I traced, all the way around, and then this is obviously faster than doing the turning method, but it gives the fabric just a tad bit of a shaggy look if you don't use a very thick satin stitch or a blanket stitch to cover the edges, the cut edges of the fabric. So cut edges, even with some fusible, can sometimes fray a tiny bit. So you can use a very thick stitch to cover up this cut edge of fabric, or you can, if you like that look, you can just straight stitch all along the edge. So I'm gonna cut this almost there. Okay. Good scissors definitely make a big difference. So now I'm going to go ahead and take off the paper. So it'll peel off really nicely like that. And so you can see it's kind of shiny, and you can feel the adhesive on there. So just like before, you're going to find the center of your background block and press it, finger press it, iron it. You can even, use a fabric safe pen and mark your center if you'd like. And here we go. Okay, so now I have the center of my block, and so I can center this wherever you want. If you want it up higher or lower, I'm going to. And if you wanted to, you can, measure this with a ruler and say, okay, I want this one, 1.25 inches there, and I want this one 1.25 inches there. So actually, it looks like it's kind of perfectly 1.5 inches. So again, though, I don't have my point is a tiny bit off, so I'm going to rotate that a little bit so that it is nicely lined up. And then with Fusible, all you have to do is take your iron and push it straight down, and it will fuse your fabric. So there's no pinning, none of that mess. You can fuse your fabric to the background so that it won't go anywhere. So now all we have to do is we have to stitch around the edge. So you can use decorative stitch. I prefer just using a straight stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lengthen my stitch length. The longer the stitches, the less crooked they'll look. So I'm going to go all the way up to 2.4. For this one. So, and I'm not going to, since I know I'm going to start and go all the way around, I'm not going to back stitch right at the beginning because I'm going to go over that when I get to the edge. So I'm going to stitch all the way around here, leave my needle down, and I'm going to rotate. Looks like it's still just maybe a tad not quite in the point, so I'm going to do one more and then move my foot. And so you can go as fast or as slow as you like and get your heart sewn on. The fusible webbing that we use is not permanent, so it does require stitching to make sure that it stays there. So it feels like it's permanent, but once it's washed, it will not stay permanently. So you see how it has a little bit of a jagged look, which looks kind of fun. But if you do not like that look, you can use the interfacing turning method. So and it's the same thing. All you're gonna do, oops, that was too fast, is stitch all the way around the heart. All the way around, and I definitely stop and I pick up my foot to make sure that it's always the same distance from the edge. So I want this distance from the stitches to the edge of the pink fabric to be the same all the way around. And I pick up my foot and reposition my project so that it will always stay the same. And I do use pressure, and I turn the fabric using both hands like this so that I can get it to make a curve. So we're almost done with this one. It's a relatively easy block, and I hope that you guys really like applique because it's super fun. It's really fun to be able to paint a picture or make a picture with just applique. So I'm just going to go over a tad bit of my stitches, and then I'm going to use the fancy lock stitch so that it locks my stitches, but it doesn't have a whole lot of bulk so that you can't see that it's over that too much. So what I'm going to do is cut my thread, and then all I would do now is you can use your 7.5 inch template. And you can line the center and trim your block so that your heart is perfectly centered in that. So that one's all done. I just have to trim the block to 7.5 inches, and the white thread looks pretty good. Though I think aqua would be shockingly beautiful. But I'm just going to finish this one real quick. So again, I'm just going to start right here on the edge, and I'm going to stitch straight down. These pins definitely get in the way, so I'm going to reposition my project and go nice and slow, whatever you're comfortable with, so that you can get it the right distance. I don't know if you guys can see that really well, but it is a little bit thicker with the interfacing and the folded edge of the fabric, so your machine might have a little bit of resistance, but you can see the difference. I think it looks a little bit more finished and spiffy, but the extra added layer of interfacing can definitely have more stiffness to your project. So the fusible webbing that we have available is by Bozal, and it's called Splendid Web. I really like it. It has it doesn't tend to gum up your needle. I don't like where that's positioned. I'm gonna move my project a tad bit there. Okay. It doesn't gum up your needle so that your machine just stops stitching, which is no fun. So some adhesives are really heavy, and they will just make it so that you'll have to change your needle because it just gets so filled with that adhesive that it can't form stitches. So that is no fun at all. All right, one more stitch here, and then I'll use the fancy lock stitch, and you can see the difference between the fusible applique and the the interface method. So these are the two heart blocks that I have. You can see the stitches go all the way around on both of them. They're locked down. We will have these on display so that you can feel the difference. And this one is a tad bit more work, you know, and it has a little bit of a lip. This one is a lot flatter, but either way is totally fine. A lot of different designers use both, so they're really fun. It's all personal preference, and sometimes you use both and sometimes you only use one. It's totally up to you. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.